The NFL is preparing for opening day, but the ongoing push for social justice and, of course, the nation being gripped in the midst of a coronavirus pandemic are certainly influencing what players and team managers are feeling on and off the field. But one member of the San Francisco 49ers front office is hoping that some of the lessons that she learned while working in the NFL will help people take charge both of their business and personal lives. SZN of Change is an 8-week journaling guide from Hannah Gordon, the team's chief administrative officer. And Hannah, who's with us now, is also the chief administrative officer and the general counsel for the San Francisco 49ers. And that means, Hannah, that your responsibilities are vast for this team. You cover all kinds of things, which I think is what makes the book very interesting. So I want to start by talking about the book, and then later on I want to talk about some of the other issues that we have been talking about, Vlad and I, here. And Vlad often talks about the fact that sports has been sort of at the forefront in American history in many cases of sort of social change, sometimes moving in that direction, kicking and screaming, but moving nonetheless. But let us talk about your book, this guided journal, and it takes a lot of the lessons that you learned in the NFL and football, and you apply it to real life. You're busy enough, so why did you want to write this book?
Really, it was for all the young people that I've met who, whether they want to work in sports or they just want to work in any field where they may not be kind of in the majority, I wanted to give them the tools that they've been asking for, the tools that worked for me. I'm a very competitive person, but for me, it's really about you're competing against yourself, but you're also cheering others on. So I wanted to write it because it's not just about getting to the top of the mountain, it's about bringing others to the mountaintop.
So how has your experience in the NFL shaped some of how you handle the struggles that you may face in everyday life?
Yeah, football is an incredible teacher, not just for football players, but really for everybody. And I think that's one of the things that especially women probably might not know is that football has taught me every lesson I needed to know, not only for my professional development, but also for my personal development. And so I think what you see up on screen is really where we start, right? So we start with film study, self-scouting. Scouting is an incredible tool that we can all use in our own lives. And it's really once we know who we are and where we've been that we can focus on vision, which is the second week, where we want to go. And then we have to figure out how we get there, which is the third week, game planning. And then you got to figure out who's going to help you get there, which is the fourth week, your team. And then we hit the hard stuff. So week 5 is about reading your clips. You guys know all about that because you're in the media. It's about how do you take in the good and bad feedback that you're getting and really decipher the noise from the constructive criticism. And then is in-game adjustments, which I think all of us who are living through 2020 are familiar with. We're all making in-game adjustments in our lives this year. And then the 7th week, which is one of my favorites, is recovery. I think self-care, often we talk about it as if it's something sort of soft or wellness oriented, and really what you see in sports is we're very focused on recovery, and that's applicable to all of us in our own lives, whether we're professional athletes or corporate athletes. And then the last week is about practice. So how do you implement this for the rest of your life and not just for these 8 weeks?
You hear over and over again how important journaling is, and my husband is great at journaling, and every time I think about that, it just feels like another commitment, like something else that I have to do every single day. So I think some people sort of get a little intimidated by the idea of committing to a daily journal. What do you say to those people?
It takes 5 minutes. So time, we're obviously all in a different time right now where you might be at home more. It's actually a great time for self-reflection. I don't think of it as a chore. If, for example, maybe on your Apple Watch, you use the breathing thing for 1 minute a day, it's essentially the same thing. This is really time for yourself. To me, this is something that's enjoyable. And I think when you practice at it, it'll become something that you really want to do. It's just like exercise, right? Like we don't all want to get up and go to the gym in the morning, but we all feel better after we do it. And then we have that dopamine rush where the next day we're like, ooh, I want to do that again.
You know what's so interesting is Anne-Marie is always doing something. She's very, very active. But it is fascinating, Anne-Marie, that journaling is one of those things that your husband does. And I love listening to the stories of the two of you because you complement each other in so many ways. But Hannah, it's just, when somebody is tackles a bunch of different things. Like there was one point when Anne-Marie was shooting pictures of food, but like, I mean like the kind that you see staged with like little sets and everything. And I was like, how is she finding the time to do that? Is there sometimes a way that you can channel your energy into something else that may not be, for example, journaling?
Sure, absolutely. And also, I love that you point out, and that Anne-Marie, you brought up your husband journals, because I think a lot of people have a misconception that journaling is something only girls or women do. And in fact, tons of men journal. And historically, almost every important historical figure kept a journal. So it's really something for both women and men. And definitely, like, you can put your energy into all kinds of things. I actually think journaling is a great way to figure out what it is that you want to do. I'm a big fan of the artist way. And I think, again, the more time you spend reflecting, the more you might realize, like, yes, I'd love to take pictures of food like Anne-Marie does. And it may be a hobby or it might be a job, but it's really, again, about bringing joy into your life and joy on whatever your path to victory is.
Okay, Hannah, I want to get into some of the tough stuff now.
Sure.
You work for the San Francisco 49ers. You know the current conversation that we have been having in this country. And many of the, whether it's the coronavirus, racial injustice, they've started to overlap, actually. What we've started to see is that the impact of the coronavirus on this country has exacerbated or put a spotlight on some of the racial injustice situations, whether it's healthcare or education or employment. And the NFL was at the center of this debate before. And part of it started with Colin Kaepernick, but it started even before. And the league has had to sort of discover its voice in the wake of this. How do you think the league is doing? It has evolved, I think, since Colin Kaepernick first took a knee. How is it doing, and where does it need to go?
Well, one thing that I love that you said, that you and Vlad pointed out, is that sports is a microcosm of society, and it always has been. So sports has historically helped push us forward in a lot of ways, because sadly, sports is more integrated than almost any other part of American life, more integrated than our schools, more integrated than our churches. And so we have been a really unique ground for those conversations, really forever. And again, like, our history is difficult, not just starting recently. It's difficult to look back at, and important to look back at the fact that the NFL actually started out integrated and then segregated in the 1930s. So, we have to face all of our history, both recent and in the deep past. In terms of what we're doing now, I think what's really positive out of everything that's going on right now is it's fostering a really important national conversation, one that we at the 49ers have been proud to be a part of for the last several years. You spoke for a moment about how coronavirus is impacting communities of color disproportionately, and that has been a focus for us at the 49ers in the corona relief that we're doing, really specifically with places like the Oakland COVID-19 Fund and directing CDC funds CDC Foundation funds to appropriate locations in the Bay Area that will serve those communities. And then I think there's also a policy opportunity here. So there's a big push from our team, but from the NFL as a whole as well, on voting, and really making sure that not only do our players vote and our staff vote, but that we're getting the word out to all Americans about the importance of registering to vote and then making a voting plan. And then there's the opportunity to directly engage on policy. So I'm very proud that we, along with the other Bay Area teams, have endorsed Proposition 16 in California, which will restore the anti-racist policy of affirmative action and bring us back to being in line with the majority of states.
The rule that requires NFL teams to interview Black or minority candidates for coaching jobs, and that the intention was quite positive. The result has not been actually more Black head coaches at all. That is the challenge, that you can change a rule and sort of write it down in black and white on a piece of paper. And as you know, as a lawyer, the way that rule is interpreted is there are all kinds of factors that impact that, and because you're not just talking about changing a rule, you're talking about the changing the fabric of the way, in many cases, this country and companies have functioned for many, many years.
Yeah, so this is actually something I've studied since college and feel really passionate about. So diverse slate interviewing, it does work, but not by itself. It has to be in combination with other things. And so in 2016 here at the 49ers, we implemented a diverse slate interviewing policy, very similar to what you would call the Rooney Rule in the NFL, but for all positions, because you also need to build that pipeline. So for all business side positions, whether it's a coordinator or a team president, you have to interview at least one woman and at least one person of color. And it can be a woman of color to reach both of those requirements because, unfortunately, as we know, women of color are even more underrepresented in our industry and in so many others. And obviously, I don't need to tell you that, Anne-Marie, because you've experienced that and triumphed in the media as you have. And so that is one piece of what has to happen. I really applaud Troy Vincent at the NFL for enhancing the policy this year, because one of the things we see is that we struggle on the business side as well. And so what they've done now is applied the Rooney Rule to the business side for top and C-level positions, which I certainly hope will influence not only what we see the business side of sports teams and NFL teams in particular looking like, but ultimately that may also have an impact on what you see in those GM and head coach positions as well.
Really, really fascinating discussion. Hannah, I'm glad we were able to get you back because I think we covered a lot of ground here. Yeah, it was really, really great. Thank you so much for spending some time with us. The book sounds amazing. It's called SZN of Change, The Competitor's Playbook for Joy on the Path to Victory. It is now available at all major bookstores. Hannah, once again, thank you so much.